tell you, after this in Daniel is a bunch of prophecy about history. And if you want to learn about that, maybe we'll come back to it in a year or so. But there's also a book from CPH that's the Reader's Edition of the Apocrypha. And the first third of that book goes through all that history in detail. It's very good to take a look at. And that, if you read the first third of that book before the Apocrypha begins, the Apocrypha is worth reading as well, but the history part there, and then come back and read the rest of Daniel, all of that will make a little bit more sense. And maybe we'll come back to it in a little time. Daniel 6, the lion den. I'm also subtitling Daniel refuses to skip church. And that's what we'll take a look at a little bit here. To begin with, I want to review chapter 3. And so if you open your Bible to chapter 3, you can skim it there. That's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And we talked about that, how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are arrested for refusing to worship a false god. In other words, for upholding the first commandment that says, "You shall have no other gods." We should fear, love, and trust in God, the one true God, above all things. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were doing, and for that, they were arrested. And we talked about how in that chapter of Daniel, there's that slowly building pressure where the world wants you to submit, to worship the false gods, and that is demonstrated in there by all the musical instruments, all the people, all those things saying this is what you have to do, and yet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stand up against it. As a result of refusing to break the first commandment, refusing to worship false idols, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace. And being thrown into a fiery furnace, what's that mean? It means certain death, right? So if we were to start a big fire and then throw Pastor Poppy in there, what would happen? He'd certainly die, right? Okay? That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are facing for refusing to break the first commandment. And yet, as they're thrown in, what's their confession? Whether we die or not, we know that our God, the one true God, is going to keep us safe. Whether we die or not, we're going to keep the first commandment. And, in fact, what happens? Jesus appears in the fiery furnace with them and keeps them safe. Not even a smell of smoke on them after they exit the fiery furnace. Okay? Questions? I know that's kind of a quick review. Remember when we talked about that? Daniel 6 is a parallel account. It's a parallel account. It's going to feel a lot the same. We're going to have a different main character. We're going to have Daniel now this time. And they're actually going to arrest Daniel for a different reason. But the results are going to be the same. Instead of a fiery furnace, we have a den full of lions. And if we threw Pastor Poppy in a den full of lions, what would happen to Pastor Poppy? Mark would feel sorry for the lions, he says. Now we have to test this. I think we need to try it. If he's at the zoo in Omaha and he gets on the other side of the fence out there on the Lion Hill, Pastor Poppy probably wouldn't stand a chance. No offense, Mark. Certain death. In Daniel 6, there is tremendous pressure to submit. In fact, I'm going to say it maybe even a little differently. Rather than just pressure to submit, I think there's also a sense of what difference does it make? you could just let it go by for a little while and you'll be fine. So it's a little different in that way, but the pressure is still there. The pressure to give in. Now, at the end, Daniel's still going to come out alive after being thrown into the lion's den. But here's the main difference. The big difference is this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were arrested for refusing to worship a false idol. Daniel is going to be arrested for refusing to skip church, for refusing to stop worshiping, for refusing to avoid church. He's going to keep on going to church, even if it means his certain death. Which is why we have a little bit of repentance that we need to do. Does that sound fair? Yeah.
It's ironic.
It's ironic.
That we deserve the fiery furnace because we don't keep the commandments, but we don't get the fiery furnace because we're saved, and he kept the commandments, still went in. So
exactly. And what we're going to talk a little bit about, we'll get there eventually, and whether we get there today or not, is when you read Daniel 6 and you think about our recent history as a nation and as a congregation and as pastors, and I'm going to throw elders under the bus with us too here, and all the congregation will all be under the bus together. I think we have something we can learn about how to act, how we should treat church as the most important thing, and how there should be nothing, not even certain death, that should stop us from being here in God's house. And that's where, as we get there, the apology part will come from. So, we're going to listen as we go through it for what charge is levied against Daniel. What charge is levied against him? I submit to you, he's refusing to break the third commandment. He's always going to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, being glad to hear God's word and keep it. I also want you to listen for some parallels that are going to make us look forward to Jesus. In Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's account, we hear of that fourth guy who's in the fire with them. With Daniel's account, we don't know what happens in the lion's den. We know that being put into this hole with the lions should mean certain death. We get this impression that it's kind of like a cave, and the cave is sealed shut with the signet ring of the king, which, as you hear that, what does it make you think of in the New Testament? What cave was sealed shut with the signet ring? The tomb of Jesus. Okay? So we don't know if Jesus was in there keeping the lions at bay, or whether Daniel's in there alone. But it sure sounds a lot like the way they handled the tomb of Jesus. And if that's what we hear when he's put in the den of lions, when he comes out alive, what does that also make us think about? The resurrection of Jesus. And what does the resurrection of Jesus mean for you and for me? Yeah, we too will rise out of our tomb. Right? When they bury me in the ground, and my body all decays and rots, even then, when Jesus comes back, I'm going to wake up. And I'm going to climb out of the tomb, or he's going to pull me out, that, so we can have room for interpretation. I'm going to wake up from death to live forever, which is pretty awesome. We're going to see that foretold in what happens to Daniel. All right. The last thing I want to purpose in a minute, is who is Darius the Mede? And we were running out of time last time when I said it's Cyrus the Great. He has the same birthday, he's the same age, he fits the description, and I'm going to try and demonstrate to you now why he's called Darius the Mede instead of Cyrus the Great in these chapters. All right, and to do that, to start with, I want to tell you, there's been a couple people who have asked, and where's a place you can go to learn more about this? There is a podcast called The Ancient World. And if you listen to the first 20 episodes of this podcast, it goes through all of recorded history in a very general way. So you get the picture of what is happening with the different nations that arise, and the kings, and the wars, and the battles. It's called The Ancient World, and it'll even go through some of the things that we've been talking about in a very easy to understand, general way. So I recommend that podcast to you. You can mix it in between episodes of KNNA Theological Programming podcasts. It's worth listening to. So, with that, the history that I want to tell you about is this. I've got a couple different colors here, and I don't know if they show up that well in the TV or not. I want to talk about Cyrus the Great's family. Because if we see his family, we can understand why he's called Darius the Mede. Now, to begin with, there's this guy at the top, and he's in red because he's a Mede. Okay, he's a Mede. I'll quick show you here. Come back. Remember, Babylon that conquered the Jews is this pink area. And to the north and to the east, you have the Median Empire, which would be Iran today versus Iraq. Iraq is Babylonia, Iran is Media. That's a real oversimplification, but that's basically the way you can look at it. Okay? This guy at the top, Cyaxares, and I'm probably butchering his name, is the king of the Medes. And he's the king of the Medes at the time of Nebuchadnezzar becoming the king of Babylon. So you see Nebuchadnezzar off to the side as well. Cyaxares has several children, one of whom is this girl, Amytis of Media. Another one is Astyages, the king of Media. And Astyages takes over for his dad. And Astyages wants to have a peace treaty so that the Medes and the Babylonians are not fighting each other. And he's smart that way because this area of the world has a kingdom arise, and then another one arise, and then another one arise, and they fight each other. And this king of Media says, I don't want to do that. I want to keep my empire. So I'm going to have a peace treaty with Nebuchadnezzar. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to have my sister Amytis marry Nebuchadnezzar. And that will seal our deal between us so that Babylon won't attack us and we won't attack Babylon. And you know her, Amytis, because when she gets to Babylon, she's homesick. Because Babylon is in Iraq, which is the desert, and she's from Media, which is mountainous but still green and growing and things like that. And so Nebuchadnezzar builds her a little slice of home in Babylon. He builds a fake mountain, and he covers it with plants, and he invents ways to have water flow down in waterfalls. And we call it the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Have you heard of that? Okay. Nebuchadnezzar builds that so that his wife from Media won't be homesick. So his brother-in-law is this guy, Astyages, the king of Media, and that keeps the peace between the Medes and the Babylonians. Astyages telling is he lives in this place, Ecbatana, and he rules over all this, but they're not the same sort of government that we have today. The Parthians still have a king, but that king submits to Astyages. Persia still has a king, but he submits to the king Astyages. And so you have all these other kingdoms that are under his one rule. In that sense, it's a lot like the Holy Roman Empire was during the time of the Reformation. You have all these kingdoms with one big king over the top of them. And that's the way that it was working. Astyages receives a prophecy that his grandson is going to overthrow him. And he had previously, before he gets this prophecy, married off his daughter, Mandane, to the king of Persia, to again keep the peace, so the Persians would stay submitted to the Medes. Okay? So Astyages' daughter marries Cambyses of Persia to keep the peace treaty and to keep Persia a part of his empire. And then he receives this prophecy that his grandson is going to kill him. And so he sends his loyal soldier down to Persia to kill his newborn grandson, Cyrus. And the guy takes Cyrus, and he's supposed to take him up into the mountains and just leave him there to die from exposure. But the guy looks at the baby, and he says, "Oh, this is such a cute baby, right? I could never kill this cute baby." And so he brings the baby back to his mother, and he goes back up to Astyages and says, "Yes, I killed the baby, even though he did not." Later on, Astyages finds out from his daughter that his grandson was not killed, and so Astyages takes his friend and has his son killed and cooked and laid out on a table, and then invites him over for a feast. Okay? Kind of brutal, right? Okay? But what's the message? When the king asks you to do something, you do it, or he'll cook your family. Okay? The friend, and I'm trying to keep the names to a minimum here, maybe that's more confusing. The friend, how does he respond to his son being laid out on the table? Is he happy or is he sad? Sad. But he keeps it to himself. He says something to the effect of, "Message received, O king." And then he waits. He waits and he waits and he waits. In the meantime, Cyrus the Great is growing up, and he becomes the ruler of the area of Persia. And he begins a rebellion. And his army starts to kick out the Medes and to rule and to take over where the Medes had been. And as he's coming to Ecbatana and trying to get in there to take over, now's the time for the friend whose son was cooked to act. And he murders Astyages and allows Cyrus in. And in that way, Cyrus the Great, who is the grandson of Astyages, and thereby related to the Babylonians, becomes the, I'm going to call him emperor of the Median Empire. Okay? And it becomes instead the Persian Empire. All right? And then Cyrus After he takes over just the Persian, or the Median part, he goes all the way up into Turkey as well. He takes over Lydia and Armenia and some of these other places. Okay? Now, Cyrus is a Persian word. We talked about that last time. It's where the Greeks eventually get their word Lord from the word Cyrus. Kurios in Greek, Kurusa in the Persian. And so in that sense, you have his Persian name, which is Cyrus. But his mother is from Media. And in that sense, he also is not just a Persian, he is a Mede. And it's for that reason then that in Daniel, we call him Darius the Mede, because we're talking about it in terms of his mother's side of things. And at the end of chapter 6, Daniel's going to say, Darius the Mede, that is Cyrus of Persia. And he's going to say there the two are actually only one guy, and that's the way that it works. History. Any questions? Am I being clear enough? All right. And we've also decided we can throw Pastor Pompey into a fiery furnace, a lion's den, or we can cook him for the next potluck, right?
Save the Lord.
Save the Lord. All right. So that's the history, and that's the connection. And if you think that's confusing, the history of this part of the world over time is even crazier outside of this. Okay? So now we have the Persian Empire and the Babylonian Empire. And we talked last time about how the Persians are going to come and they're going to fight a battle at Opis and then take over Babylon. And the Babylonian Empire is going to be incorporated into the Persians. And even the Egyptians are going to submit. And this is going to lead to the wars between the Greeks and the Persians, which are going to take place just a little while after this, which is the 300 versus the Persian army, Battle of Nike, things like that. That's what's going to come out of this. All right. Let's turn to our Bibles now, finally. Daniel 6. Daniel 6. And if somebody wants to read verses 1 through 9, I've got the microphone here. Daniel 6, 1 through 9. Anyone? All right, Daniel 6, 1 through 9.
It pleased Darius to settle the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps to give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. So this Daniel became distinguished among all the other presidents and satraps, became an excellent spirit was with him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the presidents and the satraps sought to find him around the ground for the complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of God. Then these presidents and satraps came by agreement with the king and said to him, O King, Darius live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the government are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, that you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign an document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the injunction.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we have this account of the transition. After Belshazzar is killed, we see this transition. And in order to incorporate his new kingdom, the Persian Empire, the Babylonians into the Persian Empire, what does Cyrus the Great do? He appoints regional governors called satraps. the ESV calls presidents, which I'm going to call regional governors. And they're the next layer of government, and they respond and they act in Cyrus's place with the governors, but they're the middlemen in that sense. And over the top of those, who's the chief of these presidents? Well, Cyrus is over the top of the three. Daniel's the number one president out of those three. Okay? And the reason is because Daniel's found to be, to keep it simple, an honest guy. He's an honest guy. And when you're a ruler, you want the honest guy in charge. Because why? Just put yourself in the mindset of the ancient king. Do you want the dishonest guy underneath you? No, because what's he going to do?
Kill you.
He might try to kill you unless you kill him first. So Cyrus says, I need the honest people. Daniel's one of them. He's going to deal fairly both with the people beneath him and with me. Daniel's made a president or a governor, a regional governor. Okay? And in that sense, to a certain extent, God fulfilled the office that he was promised by Belshazzar in a certain sense. He is now high up in the government again, even though it's not the government that he was promised to be in. Now, the conquering Persians who have come in and taken over Babylon, when Daniel gets put in charge, what do they feel? Yeah, why is this guy in charge? Right? Like, if we invaded Iowa and took it over, yeah, Nebraska finally showed those Iowans what's what. And we take over and we conquer all of Iowa, and we're going to incorporate it as a part of Nebraska, and then we take the governor of Iowa and leave him in charge. That's not fair. Mark wanted to be the governor of Iowa. I don't know why, but he wanted to be, right? Okay? That's what they did, and so all the Persians are jealous, and they're angry, and they're frustrated because they thought that position should have gone to one of them. And so they're trying to find a way to get rid of him, to remove him from office. Here's the thing. What kind of a guy is Daniel? A faithful, honest guy. A faithful, honest guy. So can you get rid of him by finding some sort of scandal? Right? No. Can you levy some sort of lie against him? No. Okay? Because everybody knows he's an honest, truthful, faithful guy. So they come up with one plan to get Daniel out of the way. And the plan is this. They create a law that stops all worship in the Persian Empire, all prayer requests, I'm going to say it that way, unless that prayer request is directed to who?
King Cyrus.
Cyrus the Great. Now that's confessing two things. First off, what are they confessing about Cyrus then?
He's God.
He's God on earth. And second off, it's saying about all the other gods what? They're underneath him and they're not essential. I'm going to use that word. Okay? They're not essential.
Question.
Yes?
Timeline. What is the timeline from when Belshazzar was killed in chapter 5 to now, and then Daniel being in this position?
Yeah. This is the situation as Belshazzar is ruling in 540. And it's like October 10th in the year 539 that the Persians take over the Babylonian Empire. By this point, remember when Daniel went from Israel, or from Judah, to Babylon, he was like 14 years old, and that was in 605. And so, it's sometime after 539 539. But it's not terribly far after that because Cyrus isn't going to be alive for too much longer. And Daniel at this point is probably in his late 70s to early 80s age-wise. So I would say 539 to 530, somewhere in there, is when this is taking place. Yeah? Oh, okay. So, the plan is to make worshiping the true God non-essential. And they do it in a very tricky way, too. They don't say you can never again worship God. They just say you can't worship God for how long? 30 days. Okay? Maybe you could say 4.5 weeks to slow the... No. Okay. Right? See how this starts to get a little bit cutting right towards us? Okay? There's a short period of time where worshiping the one true God is going to be non-essential. I'm using our modern terms. You can tell me I'm reading into it too much. But that's what's happening. All right. Lynn, you had your hand up earlier. Would you read verse 10 for us? Should I hand you the microphone? Yeah. All right. 6 verse 10 then.
When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously.
All right. Thank you, man. Now that worshiping the true God is not essential for 30 days, what's Daniel do? Yeah. And the text tells us how.
With his windows open.
His window's open, so it's not
He's not hiding.
hiding it. How many times a day?
3.
3. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, 3 times. That's already more than we do. But it also tells us what? In the exact same way that he had before. That's what it says. Okay? 3 times a day, and prayed and gave thanks, as he had done previously. Does the decree change anything for him? No. And think about, so we have this example. Think about during the Roman persecutions. Christians were told, you may not worship this Jesus guy anymore. And what did they keep on doing in the same way? Worshiping. To the point where some of them were getting arrested and killed, burned alive, crucified, frozen in winter lakes. The list of ways could go on and on. Grilled. Now we can put Pastor Poppy on the gridiron too, right? All these examples where people kept on worshiping, even in the face of certain death. And it all goes back to what we're going to see as we go forward. What certainty did Daniel have? Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. God's going to take care of him. And if he dies, he's going to die in the faith. And what's that mean? Resurrection, heaven. Okay? And we see that example throughout all the history. And that's then where I think I'm going to speak on Pastor Poppy and I's behalf. We probably need to apologize to all of you, because when we faced a period of time where church was non-essential, We did a lot of stuff to try and keep it going, but we didn't just have the doors open, as we should have. So now, am I putting words in your mouth, Pastor Bobby?
No, you're being a little too meek in mine.
Okay.
There's no problem. There's no problem. We sinned. We wimped out. We heard 15 days to slow the spread. We wanted to do our part. And after 15 days, it became clear and obvious that 15 days to slow the spread was not the end game. That was just the beginning to get everybody on board. At that point in time, we should have said, enough. We're coming back to church. I'll cut everybody some slack on that 15 days to slow the spread. We were told there were going to be tens of thousands of people dropping dead in the street. That's what we were told. It was a lie. 15 days to slow the spread was a lie. So, whether it was a malicious lie or a lie out of stupidity, I don't know, but it was a lie. And after 15 days, we should have seen it. And we should have said, we're just going to do church and come at your own comfort level, just like we do every Sunday and every Wednesday. We didn't. We wimped out. We drug our feet. We were worried about offending people, and we sinned.
And whether it was based on a lie or not, we would have read this in Daniel and seen Daniel's example. I mean, the fault is ours, so that we beg your forgiveness. But I think there's a lot of parallels, and Daniel sets us the right example. Whether we live or die, the third commandment is pretty clear. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. That means we should hear God's word gladly, we should listen to it, and we should be where God's giving his gifts. So there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
Pastor Pop, he always stresses your God is what you believe in, or who you believe in. And the people that make all these stupid rules are worshiping their God when they make those rules.
Right. So, he's exactly right. Everyone has their God that they're worshiping in this. Our God says we should hear his word and be in church. And so, there you go. That's what we're going to try and do. That part we kind of covered now. Next week we'll pick up with this and we'll keep on plugging away. And we'll learn about Daniel's arrest and Daniel's time in the lion den. Next week is Christmas. We will not do Daniel next week. Next week we're going to do a Bible study still. We're going to learn, last year we did Christmas for the month of December. There's a couple of updates on that, archaeologically and exegetically, that I'm going to talk about as far as the historicity of Christmas. So that we'll do one time next week, 2 weeks from today, on New Year's, we'll get back to Daniel. So, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.